When people hear Africa, poverty is often the first thing that comes to mind, but that's a narrow and outdated view. The truth is, Africa is incredibly diverse, economically, culturally, and geographically. Some African countries are struggling, yes, but others have booming cities, thriving tech industries, and growing middle classes. Not all African countries are poor, but in this video, we're focusing on those that are facing the toughest challenges. The 10 poorest countries in Africa, based on GDP per capita. But instead of just listing names and numbers, we'll look at the bigger picture, what led to the poverty, how history and politics play a role, and what signs of progress are starting to emerge. So let's count down from number 10 to number 1, and unpack the real stories behind the stats. Starting us off at number 10 is Togo, a narrow little country in West Africa. Most people know it for its port city, Lome, but outside the capital, life can be really tough. Togo was under French colonial rule until 1960, and since then, it's had a bumpy ride. Military coups, long periods of authoritarian rule, and underinvestment. In public services like schools and hospitals, about 70% of people work in agriculture. But most of it is small-scale farming. It doesn't generate much income, and infrastructure in rural areas is limited. Add in corruption and weak institutions, and you've got a recipe for poverty that's hard to shake. That said, Togo's been making some moves lately, improving internet access, pushing renewable energy projects, and attracting more foreign investment. So there's potential, but a long road ahead. Next up is Liberia, at number 9. This country has a powerful history. It was founded by freed American slaves in the 1800s, and you'd think that would be a strong start. But unfortunately, the past few decades have been incredibly rough. Liberia went through 2 brutal civil wars between the 1980s and early 2000s. Entire systems collapsed. Education, healthcare, roads, all gone or severely damaged. Just when things were starting to get better, the Ebola outbreak hit in 2014, setting the country back again. Today, the economy is fragile, youth unemployment is super high, and even though Liberia is rich in natural resources like iron ore and rubber, corruption has slowed down development. Still, there's hope. More young people are getting educated, there's investment in digital banking, and the tourism sector is slowly growing, especially with the country's beautiful coastline. At number 8, we have Niger. This is one of the hottest and driest countries in the world. The Sahara takes up most of the land, and droughts are a constant threat. Most people rely on farming and herding animals. But when rain doesn't come, food becomes scarce. Add in one of the fastest growing populations in the world, and you've got massive pressure on schools, water, and health services. Niger also faces security issues, especially in the western region where terrorist groups operate near the borders with Mali and Burkina Faso. The government and NGOs are working on improving girls' education and access to healthcare. But it's a slow climb. Still, the potential is there if peace and investment can hold. Number 7 is Madagascar, and this one might surprise you. Most people think of Madagascar as the land of lemurs and rainforests, and it's true. It's one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, but poverty here is deep and widespread. After gaining independence from France in 1960, Madagascar faced years of political instability, including coups and contested elections. The rural economy depends heavily on vanilla and cloves, but those markets are unstable, and profits often don't reach local farmers. Also, deforestation and cyclones are big problems. When a major storm hits, it can wipe out homes, crops, roads, and it takes years to recover. The silver lining: there's been more focus on ecotourism, solar energy, and environmental conservation, which could bring jobs while protecting the island's natural treasures. Coming in at number 6 is the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo. This country is massive and unbelievably rich in resources: gold, copper, cobalt, you name it. But it's also one of the poorest, and that's a tragedy. The problem? Decades of conflict, colonial exploitation by Belgium, corruption, and rebel violence. In the east, armed groups still fight over land and minerals, displacing millions of people. Most of the population doesn't benefit from the country's wealth. Infrastructure is poor, healthcare is fragile, and electricity barely reaches many homes. Still, with the global demand for cobalt used in batteries, there's growing international interest. If mining profits could be managed responsibly, the DRC could turn things around in a big way. At number 5, we've got Mozambique, a southeastern African country with huge potential, but also huge challenges. Mozambique came out of a 15-year civil war in the 1990s. Since then, it's had some political stability, but poverty has remained stubbornly high. Why? A mix of factors. Frequent cyclones, debt scandals, and a violent insurgency in the north linked to extremist groups. Like many others on this list, most people depend on farming, but climate change is making that harder. On the flip side, there's been big investments in natural gas. The country could become a major energy exporter in the next decade, if managed well. So yeah, it's a country caught between promise and pressure. In fourth place is the Central African Republic. This country has been stuck in cycles of violence and instability for years. Armed groups control large parts of the country. Government authority is really limited outside the capital. The economy is super fragile. Roads are bad, access to electricity is limited, and healthcare is nearly non-existent in rural areas. Even though CAR has diamonds, gold, and timber, those resources often fund conflict instead of development. The UN has a peacekeeping mission there, and some international aid is flowing in, but without long-term peace and stronger leadership, it's hard to imagine major change anytime soon. Still, local communities are showing resilience, rebuilding schools, launching local markets, and pushing forward the best they can. Number 3 is Malawi, a landlocked country in southeastern Africa. Malawi is peaceful and known as the warm heart of Africa, but poverty runs deep here. Over 80% of the population depends on farming, mostly maize. But when there's a drought or crop failure, millions go hungry. The economy is vulnerable, and there's very little industry to provide alternative jobs. Another big challenge? Population growth. With limited resources and growing demand for education and health services, the system is stretched thin. That said, Malawi has made real progress in education and reducing child mortality. The government is also working with partners to build resilience against climate shocks. It's a slow journey, but not a hopeless one. At number 2 is South Sudan, the world's youngest country, born in 2011 after decades of fighting with Sudan. But even after independence, South Sudan has struggled to find stability. Civil war broke out just 2 years later, displacing millions. Peace talks have made some progress, but violence still flares up in parts of the country. Ironically, South Sudan has oil, but most of it is exported, and the wealth hasn't reached ordinary people. Infrastructure is weak, and in many places, people don't have access to clean water, schools, or health clinics. Still, the people are strong. Local peace initiatives and community rebuilding efforts are happening. It's a fragile state, one with potential if peace can take root. And finally, at number 1, Burundi. It's the poorest country in Africa by GDP per capita, and one of the poorest in the world. Burundi is tiny and densely populated. Most people rely on farming, but the land is overworked and not very fertile. Add in ethnic tensions, a long history of civil war and political crackdowns. You've got a nation that struggled to move forward. Nearly 3/4 of Burundians live below the poverty line. Malnutrition is common, and access to electricity or clean water is extremely limited outside the cities. But here too, there are efforts to change things. NGOs are working on sustainable agriculture, youth education, and women's health. Not easy, but the desire for a better future is definitely there. So there you have it. The 10 poorest countries in Africa and a deeper look into the why behind the numbers. It's not just about economics. It's about history, politics, environment, and human resilience. If you learned something new, go ahead and hit that like button. And if you want to learn about the top 10 richest countries in Africa, kindly subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.